The issuance of the Warren Commission report found us involved in an experience in contemporary America unlike any previous experience. The report was issued in September 1964, some 10 months after the assassination in Dallas of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The very day the report was issued, although it was nothing more than a one-volume report which purportedly was a fair summation of some 26 volumes of evidence which had not yet been published. The very day the report was issued, it was hailed by the media in this country as being an authoritative document which answered every question and resolved every doubt. But it was nothing more than a summation of evidence which at that time no one could see. And one wonders today how it was possible for such responsible publications as the New York Times, for one example, to hail the report as being conclusive even before the evidence was released. Then the 26 volumes of evidence were released some 2 months later. On the very day that the evidence was released, Anthony Lewis, then the Washington correspondent for the New York Times, wrote an article 3 hours after he had received the 26 volumes of evidence, in which he said the material contained in the 26 volumes proves conclusively that Earl Warren and his colleagues were correct in stating that Oswald, the one lone unhappy man, was the lone assassin. Since it took me a bit more than a year and a half to read all of the evidence in the 26 volumes, I've always wondered, assuming that I do read more slowly than Mr. Lewis, I've always wondered how it was possible for Mr. Lewis to summarize all of the material in 3 hours so that he could report to the American people precisely what the meaning of all of it was. I think this, first, the immediate response of the media to the report before the evidence could be seen, and then before it could be examined, the assurances that the evidence supported the report in every respect, was indicative of a very serious problem which existed at that time in America and which exists at the present time. For when there is no free press, when there is no free media, radio and television reporters, seeking to uncover information, when there is instead a consensus from above imposed upon the American people in so basic a question, we have reached a sad state of affairs in our nation. Now, I've just come now from a meeting here with the Los Angeles press in a room in the building. Now, I would say that the Neanderthal position taken still by many of the representatives of the press is indicative of the fact that this problem still exists in America and still is a serious problem. For 2.5 years, not a single network, radio or television program in America permitted one word of questioning about the validity of the Warren Commission report to be broadcast. 2.5 years, not one word in this country on a single network radio or television program. Now, I visited during that period of time 14 countries throughout Europe, and there is not a single country that I visited where there was not a vast and deep interest in this case, and where radio and television network coverage was not immediately available, except in our own country, except here where the media said no. The government has said Oswald did it, and did it alone, and there can be no questioning of that edict. And that, I suggest, is a dangerous situation, and one which unfortunately still prevails. But during that 2.5 years, I crisscrossed this country on many occasions, because there was one community where it was possible to have a dialogue on the question of the death of President Kennedy and the Warren Commission report, and that is the campuses of America. And I'm happy to be back here again. It's like coming home to come to America and come to a college campus where it is possible to talk with people who are interested in facts. Now, you may have noticed in reading the papers, yesterday's Los Angeles Times as a good example, that members of the Warren Commission have broken their vow of silence taken when they were appointed and are now beginning to talk about the case. Not about the facts, but they're beginning to attack those who disagree with the Commission's conclusions. But even that is a step forward. At least they're beginning to talk. And why did that take place? Because two polls recently taken, one by Lou Harris and one by the Washington Post, showed that the overwhelming majority of the American people today say they do not believe the essential conclusion of the Warren Commission report. They do not believe that one lone man was the assassin of President Kennedy. And now the members of the Commission, for the first time, are beginning to speak. And what do they say? Congressman Ford and Mr. Dulles, former director of the CIA, removed from that position by President Kennedy. These two gentlemen have now spoken out and have said quite frankly that they consider it to be a disservice to the memory of President Kennedy to challenge the Warren Commission report. I suggest that those who professed concern for the things for which President Kennedy lived have shown, in fact, a callous indifference to the manner in which he died. And if there is a disservice that has been rendered, and I believe there has been one rendered, it is a disservice to the truth and to the memory of the President, rendered by the Warren Commission in issuing a fraudulent report about the manner of his death in the first place, and secondly, because the members of the Commission have now insisted upon silence and obedience to their edict. Here we have the final story about what happened in Dallas. It's called The Truth About Kennedy Assassination. It's a U.S. News and World Report, which of course presents nothing but the truth, generally. And it carries in it an interview with Arlen Specter. Mr. Specter is one of the members of the Commission, one of the lawyers for the Commission, who played an important role in developing the most imaginative theory, which the Commission considered and then accepted, and that is that one bullet hit the President in the back of the neck, lower portion of the neck, exited through the front of his throat, leaving behind what the doctor said was an entrance wound. Then the bullet continued on, and to explain the fact that Governor Connally appeared to be reacting 1.8 seconds after the President was shot, the bullet evidently hung there in midair for approximately that period of time, and then proceeded on, entering the governor's back, smashing his fifth rib, exiting from his fifth rib, fracturing his right wrist, and then entering into his left thigh. If you don't believe that, you cannot believe the Warren Commission report, because that story is essential to an acceptance of the Commission's report, because there just was not time, even by the Commission's own reckoning, for an extra bullet to have been fired. It was that one bullet which did all of the damage to Governor Connally and struck President Kennedy as well. And Mr. Specter is the imaginative district attorney of Philadelphia, who was counsel for the Commission, who developed that most inventive theory. And in the interview, I'm just going to pass upon some of the highlights which Mr. Specter has touched upon in his valiant defense of the Warren Commission report. Let me say that Mr. Specter has been invited to debate with me on national radio and television networks now for some months. The Today Show and a dozen other network programs and scores of other local radio and television programs, or network and syndicated radio and television programs. He has declined to do so, always stating that he is not a spokesman for the Commission. He could not speak for the Commission, but he insists upon giving individual interviews which cannot be answered to the press regarding his defense of the Commission report.